Prime Minister is in Salzburg. It's an informal European leaders summit. After this, there'll be another one in Brussels on the 18th, 19th of October. And then there'll be another big leaders summit, an exceptional summit, to be held at some point in mid-November. We think starting on the 12th of November, but we don't know. But sometime in November. So we are now going into about 8 weeks of very, very intensive Brexit talks. And the idea, folks, is that whatever deal is going to be thrashed out has to be done in this period, because then that deal has to then go and be ratified by 27 other parliaments, in fact, actually including our parliament, 28. Oh, I nearly forgot. And the European Parliament, that's 29 parliaments that have to ratify all of this so that we can leave under Article 50 at 11 p.m. on March the 29th, 2019. Now, I would advise all of you, don't follow necessarily every single twist and turn in the road. There'll be constant good cop, bad cop coming from the European Union. I mean, only yesterday we were getting briefings that maybe the European Union were prepared to be much nicer over the northern-southern Irish border question. But today, the Prime Minister turns up in Salzburg, and Monsieur Barnier, the chief negotiator, well, he's back on the attack. Here he was.
We are clarifying which goods arriving in Northern Ireland from the rest of the UK would need to be checked, and where, when, and by whom these checks could be performed.
So there are still difficulties as far as he's concerned over how we deal with the Irish border. Similarly, Donald Tusk, the President of the European Council, has been saying very similar things. Now, of course, folks, there is actually, to an issue that's been presented as being very complex, there is actually one very simple solution. In fact, it couldn't be easier. We agree a tariff-free deal with the European Union, then there is no issue over the Irish border whatsoever, other, of course, than the issues that exist already, because we already have, on different sides of that border, different corporate tax rates, different income tax rates, different VAT rates, oh, I nearly forgot, and a different currency. But this could be solved very, very easily. But there is one principle that Theresa May says she is sticking to. And she says very, very clearly that whatever happens, Northern Ireland should not be treated differently to the rest of the United Kingdom. Now, it's all well and good saying that, but she was the Prime Minister who was dragged out of bed at 3:30 in the morning last December, left Downing Street at 4:15, flew for an emergency meeting with Monsieur Barnier in Brussels. I mean, the British Prime Minister flew to meet an unelected bureaucrat who'd set a deadline, and she agreed to the Irish backstop position. The Irish backstop being that actually they may stay part of the customs union and single market even if we left, thereby dividing constitutionally the UK. So rattled was she by that. She then came up with checkers, which meant in order to satisfy them over Northern Ireland, the whole of the United Kingdom would effectively stay part of the single market. So we do not go into these negotiations from a particularly strong standpoint. But let me ask you, is she right to say that whatever happens, the UK should stay united? Or is there an argument that perhaps to get the Brexit we need, Northern Ireland should or could be treated differently? Let me know what you think. If you think May is right on this principle, even if she may have carried it out badly, call me on 0345 6060 973. Or maybe you think, actually, do you know what? If we just loosen the Constitution for a bit, as long as we get Brexit, none of this really matters, in which case text to 84850. I think there's another solution, as I do, in which case tweet using the hashtag Farage on LBC at LBC, and of course watch us on Facebook and comment there too. Alex is a brand new caller to this show. He lives in Newport in South Wales. Welcome, Alex.
Hi, Nigel. How are you?
I'm well, and I tell you what gets me, Alex. You know, I met Barnier last week. I met Juncker last week, and I really genuinely believe that for the first time since Brexit, the pressure's now coming on them from German industry and French industry as such, that if we just said, right, let's chuck checkers, let's get rid of the backstop, let's just say, guys, we've decided we're actually going to leave all the institutions, we just want a simple free trade deal. I reckon, Alex, they'd probably give it to us.
Of course they would.
You agree?
Yes, I do.
So why doesn't the Prime Minister just do that?
Because she's frightened of leaving Europe.
But she's got an instruction, Alex, from the British people in a referendum. She stood on a manifesto saying that she would take us out of the single market and the customs union and the European Union. So what's she scared of, Alex?
What is she scared of?
Yeah.
She's frightened of repercussions from Europe.
Repercussion? What, you mean they might be beastly to us?
Yes.
Are they really that...
You're
Are they that horrible over there, Alex?
Oh, good grief. We're the biggest enemies since the Nazis because we voted to leave.
Are we? Well, I tell you what, on a personal level, Alex, and this is absolutely true, there are now a whole host of coffee bars, pubs and restaurants in Brussels that will not allow me through the front door.
That doesn't surprise me because Europe is a wounded animal.
I think it is. So what... OK, Alex, you take that view, very similar to me. What do you think Mrs May should be saying tonight? They're giving her 10 minutes, which is good of them, isn't it? They're giving her 10 minutes at this dinner tonight to put her case. You're the Prime Minister, Alex. What do you say?
Drop the backstop option or there's no deal. And I'm leaving now.
OK, but that would be an admission that she'd made a mistake, wouldn't it?
Well, she's decided to run the negotiations her way.
Yes.
She's got to answer people about her actions. But if I was Prime Minister, I would say if you don't drop the backstop option, the talks are over and we're going.
OK, Alex, I've got it. Couldn't be clearer. Thank you. Ali is a new caller from Basel in Essex. Good evening, Ali.
Mr. Farage, what a pleasure to speak to you finally.
Pleasure to speak to you. I'm sorry it's taken you ages to get through, but I'm pleased you're on. So, Ali, come on, let's put you in this position. You're there tonight at dinner. You've got the big bosses of Europe in front of you. What are you going to say?
Have I had dinner and have I had the champagne?
Oh, listen, the one thing I can say in favour of the European Union, there is no shortage of champagne before the meal. And let me tell you, the red wine's pretty good they serve too. I mean, this, of course, is how I've seen many British MEPs in my nearly 20 years there who've gone to Brussels being rather sceptical about the whole thing, but within 6 months they love it.
Well, that means it's good red wine then, doesn't it, Nigel?
Well, it does,
So,
it does.
what-
But
what
that
I was-
aside, what would you say?
After I've had my 4 or 5 courses and the red wine, I would say, hello, everybody. Can we just stick to the programme?
Right.
We're out. Game over. We're out. There's nothing left to speak about, Nigel. You know, we're out.
Well, no, come on. I mean, I'm a pretty hardline leaver. Of course I am. But we do have to sort out some neighbourly issues like flights, etc., don't we?
Yeah, we do. But the fact is, we voted out. Don't get me wrong. I'm not going to give away my in or out side of things. However, we're out. It's time to go.
And does that, Ali, does that, and, you're there in the hot seat, does that mean, come what may, Northern Ireland is treated as the same as the rest of the United Kingdom?
Did you say come what, Theresa May?
Very good, very good. You're on form, dear boy, you're on form.
No,
but I mean, does she...
What you're saying, Nigel, I agree.
Because, I mean, she could, I suppose, jettison Northern Ireland in one sense and kind of pacify Monsieur Barnier on that point if she chose to, but that would be a complete betrayal of the nation, wouldn't it?
Yeah, but I believe the hands have already been dealt, Nigel. When you've got... let me give you a quick analogy of poker. Not that you need to. If you've got a full house, you won that game. You can't then turn back and say, hold on a minute, I didn't have a full house. I've got... And then 2 more cards appear from behind you and go, oh, look, there's 2 more aces here. The full house has been declared. It's time to move on. Get with the programme. We've decided this is what's going to happen. We've voted.
Yep.
We've voted. Let's get, I've never wanted to say this, let's get behind her. Her cards have been played. She has to understand that we've said out let's get out.
Because the trouble is, Ali, she's going into these talks tonight, and her basic message is, please don't be beastly to us, please be nice to us. That's not a very good place to be, is it?
No, what she's saying is, please, Nigel, help me. I need help.
Well, I tell you what.
No one will help her.
I tell you what, I'd love to help her if I had the opportunity. Ali, you're a star. Thank you. Andrea says on Facebook, when did we vote to join the WTO? Andrea, we voted to leave. And if we leave with no deal, the WTO is kind of how most world trade operates. Jane says, shut our borders. Give Northern Ireland back to Ireland. Oh, Jane, I think we may get some unionists calling very shortly from Belfast and elsewhere. Jane, there are some people, and LBC did some polling on this in the past, and we've debated this, and Nick Ferrari, certainly in his show, has debated this, and there are some people who think, the hell with it, just ditch Northern Ireland, but I just don't think constitutionally it's something any British government could even contemplate doing. Stephen says, no one has the answer to this. Odd how no one discussed it before the mad vote to leave. Steve, the mad vote, as you described, there was no debate about Ireland from either side. It was something the European Commission plucked out of the air and made an issue. I'm going to go to South Croydon and speak to Chris. Chris, good evening.
Oh, good evening. What I was suggesting, Nigel, we make them an offer they can't refuse.
Go on.
Either they accept the solution we've offered, or for every day that passes without their acceptance, we knock 100 million quid off our divorce.
Oh, I like
or
that.
200 million, if you
like.
like.
Oh, I like that.
In fact, you can tell Monsieur Barnier that the clock is ticking. Or
quote his words.
Tic-tac, tic-tac. And I actually get one of those clocks like they do in a chess match, bang it down the table in front of you, bang the starter so you could tick-tock.
You're a hardliner, Chris.
Yes, very.
Very. And what about Northern Ireland, Chris? I can't believe she agreed to the backstop. I think Chequers was a complete surrender, but at least she's been good on the one principle of keeping the UK together, hasn't she?
Yeah. Oh, what I'm yes, I know, but they're just weaponising that
they are.
little bit. It only affects about a couple of million people out of all the millions of people in Europe. He's just he's an awkward cuss. Well, that's the ultimate bureaucrat, isn't he? He's the bloke who makes you sort of wait around for 3 hours while you fill in a form.
He is the ultimate bureaucrat, is the best description of Monsieur Barnier I've ever heard. Chris, thank you. And Chris says, tell them to get on with it. We're cutting a couple of 100 million quid off the divorce bill every day they muck us about. I like people like Chris. You're listening to The Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. It's now time for the news headlines with Lisa Aziz. Mrs May's in Salzburg. All the European leaders are there. It's an informal summit. Dinner will be served very soon. No doubt a magnificent one. And she will get 10 minutes tonight to speak to the EU leaders about these Brexit negotiations that we're told have to be concluded by the middle of November. So we are entering a very crucial, very critical phase. And yesterday we got the good cop message that actually the EU were prepared to really be quite flexible about the border between Northern Ireland and the Republic. And today they're saying, well, there are still lots of questions to answer. This is all really very difficult. Is Mrs May right to say that the United Kingdom has to stay united whatever happens? Or would it make sense, perhaps, to put them in a slightly different position with single market rules and the customs union, provided it meant the rest of the UK had a clean break? That's the essential question I'm asking you this evening. I'm going to Hayes to speak to Hamid, who is a new caller to this show. Welcome.
Hello, Mr. Nigel. How are you?
I am well. So, what do you think Mrs May says tonight, Hamid?
Great, thank you very much. It's my first time, and thanks for having me here.
No, welcome to have you, please.
Thank you. Well, my view is really specific about the Northern Ireland and Irish people as well, the Republic of Ireland. So I think it is to do more with the people over there, that what they think, what they want. Even I think Theresa May has already thought about this issue, that issues which has to deal with the ethnicity or with the identity, that's going to be very complicated. So I think Theresa May has to really listen to Irish people themselves in Northern Ireland and also in Ireland as well.
And let me back that point up, Hamid, with what I think is a very important point. And that is the Good Friday Agreement. And, there were concessions that were made in that I found very difficult and very uncomfortable. But the fact is, 20 years on, Northern Ireland is a lot better than it was during 30 years of troubles. And one of the key parts of that Good Friday Agreement states very clearly that the principle of consent means it's for the people of Northern Ireland alone to decide whether they remain part of the United Kingdom. So actually, to hold true to that Good Friday Agreement, she can't, can she, sacrifice Northern Ireland as part of a negotiation?
Not really, no. Really, that's my really specific view about letting the Northern Ireland people themselves talk more about what they want. So that's my
I think that's absolutely right. And Hamid, tell me, overall, how do you feel she's handling Brexit?
Overall, not really as good as the people what they wanted. Like they want to have the control back to the country. They want to make their own laws and to deal with anyone they want. So not really so good dealing with the Brexit issues.
No, but that's how most of us feel. Hamid, give her marks out of 10 for Brexit so far.
I would give it 6 out of 10.
Oh, that's quite generous. Hamid, thanks for your call. Do call us again soon. Hi, Nigel. We voted as the UK. We leave as the UK. No part of the UK should be treated differently, says Adrian in Dumfries in Scotland. Northern Ireland must remain part of the UK. Otherwise, we reward IRA violence, is how Mark feels. Leave means leave, not leave a little bit behind, says Tony, and I do rather get that point. I think she's right on this basic principle, but she's been played by Barnier on this, and she's conceded way too much. Rob on Facebook says this was not a Northern Ireland referendum, it was a UK referendum, and the UK voted out. That is true. Michael is a brand new caller from Rill. Hi, Michael, how are you?
Hello, Mr. Farage. Thank you very much indeed for all your great efforts to get us out of the EU.
Well, I've done my best so far, but it looks like there's a bit more work to be done, possibly, Michael. On the basic point, is May right to say whatever happens, the UK must stay united?
She's absolutely correct, but I fear she may vacillate. She's a lady that vacillates. She's done this. This is what Rees-Mogg's concerned about as well. But I'd just like to say, Nigel, that the thing is if Mrs May does vacillate and Northern Ireland are treated differently from the other three nations of the United Kingdom, then the DUP will raise their fists because they know that the Northern Irish people are incredibly loyal to the United Kingdom and to the monarchy. And the DUP know that they will suffer tremendously at the hands of the Northern Irish voters should Northern Ireland be treated any differently than the United Kingdom.
And there are 10 DUP MPs, and they actually are the difference, are they not, Michael, between Mrs May having a majority in the House of Commons and not?
Absolutely, and that's why I think that this will not happen, that she, even though she does vacillate, I think the DUP will be a great check upon her.
So do I. No, so do I, Michael. And on that principle, I agree. The problem is, in order to maintain that principle, she accepted something called the backstop back in December at the behest of Monsieur Barnier, and she goes in to these next 8 or 9 weeks of negotiations in quite a weak place, doesn't she?
Yes, she does. She's laid her cards a bit too much on the table.
Would it be fair to say she blinked first?
Yes, I would agree with that.
That's what I think. Michael, you're a star. Thank you very much indeed. Richard in Westmoreland says, why not pay the EU a bit more money and get a Canada-style trade deal? Well, Canada didn't pay a bean for that trade deal, and they're not going to be beholden to the European Court of Justice in Luxembourg, and they're not going to have to accept the free movement of people. But, Richard, the principle of a Canada-style trade deal on goods with an added bid on for services is something that I now genuinely believe the European Union would bite our arm off for. Why does the Prime Minister not want a simple free trade deal? Why does the Prime Minister want to keep us as close as she possibly can to a whole set of European institutions, despite the fact we voted to leave? That, I think, is at the heart of the Brexit negotiation problem. I'm going to Belfast to speak to Mark. Mark, good evening.
Good evening, Nigel. How are you?
I am well. Well, so far, Mark, nearly all of my callers say it's right to maintain the integrity of the UK, but there's a few English voters would say, well, the hell with Northern Ireland, as long as we can leave.
Well, I last spoke to you in May as we disembarked the flight from Belfast to London, the day after, ironically,
I remember. We spoke on the tarmac at City Airport, didn't we?
Precisely, yes.
Yeah, I remember.
And I mentioned to you at the time that myself and 3 generations of my family voted Leave simply because we are Republican.
Yep.
And we believe in the right of people to determine their own destiny rather than have it decided as you have fought for so many years.
I remember the conversation very clearly. Yes, I remember the conversation very clearly. Very clearly.
So, where I'm coming at it from now is that almost all of our political parties, Sinn Féin, SDLP, to an extent the official Unionist Party, and the underrepresented yet over-broadcast Alliance Party, are telling us persistently that we must oppose Brexit. And the BBC have gone so far recently as to come out with polls which show the majority here in favour of reunification of our country, which is something I've struggled for a very long time. I spent 3 years on the Fianna Fáil Ard Comhairle a long time ago, trying to bring about the peaceful reunification of our country. The problem now is that we have these same idiots who cannot recognise that 20 years ago they were telling us, you must vote for the Good Friday Agreement, you must facilitate consent amongst the people of the island to bring about whichever constitutional settlement we may decide upon in the future. They are now telling us to backtrack from that and say, no, this place must be treated quite differently.
It's bizarre. It's bizarre. Mark, would you, I mean, as a Republican that wants a united Ireland but sees Brexit as being a logical move in that direction, is it about time there was a debate in the Republic about whether they stayed part of the European Union?
Well, ironically, I was in the Bonington Hotel a couple of weeks ago with your colleague, Mr. Kelly.
And he's launching a new party in Ireland, isn't he?
Well, it's launched already.
Yes.
And he got the signatories, including my own.
Okay.
To bring that about.
Do you know, Mark, if you're an Irish nationalist, it is quite logical you would not want to be part of the European Union. It is an absolute mystery to me how Sinn Féin, who I shared a platform with in Dublin, in that referendum on the Lisbon Treaty, it's a mystery to me how they've sold out to European Union interests. Mark, thank you for your perspective, very interesting perspective, and thank you for your call. Well, you're listening to The Nigel Farage Show here on LBC, and it's now 6:30 and time for the news with Lisa Aziz. Well, Theresa May's in Salzburg. Dinner will be about to begin, and she'll get 10 minutes to talk to the other European leaders, plus the bosses of the European Commission and the European Council, to set out her case for Brexit. It seems the opening pitch from her is, please don't be beastly to us. We want to have a reasonable compromise over how we deal with the issue of the Irish border. The solution, folks, is dead plain simple. It's to have a simple free trade agreement, which I now think the European Union actually would bite our arm off for if we thought to offer it to them. Tell you the odd thing, though, the Brexit secretary isn't with her. Why is Dominic Raab not there backing up the Prime? He might not be invited into the dinner, but you'd have thought he'd have been there. I don't know why he's not going, but you know where he is? This will amaze you. In 25 minutes, he's going to be sitting in this studio. Because Dominic Raab, Brexit Secretary, is coming on LBC at 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. tonight. And yep, of course, Ian Dale will have a debate and ask him questions. But you get the chance to ask the Brexit Secretary your questions on Northern Ireland, the backstop, or whatever it may be. Gosh, I wish I got the chance to ask him questions. Like, how could you, Dominic, as the fervent Brexiteer that you were, accept the Chequers proposal? Not, of course, that I would even attempt to put any thoughts in your mind on this question. But an exciting hour coming up, I think, between 7 and 8. And well done, Ian Dale, for getting Dominic Raab in. So, before I come back to this Northern Irish question and whether May is right to insist on maintaining the integrity of the UK. By the way, I think she is right, and under the Northern Irish, Good Friday Agreement, she's got no choice anyway, it seems to me. But a little bit of news from London, and that is that Sadiq Khan has been looking at an idea that has come out of Glasgow, namely that knife crime in future will be treated as a public health issue. And so the unit would include not just police, but health workers, local government staff, in order to start dealing with this terrible problem of knife culture at a much earlier age and at a much lower level. All I can say, a couple of years on, Sadiq, is thank goodness you appear at last to be doing something, because the thing that has utterly amazed me is that, with over 100 people killed so far this year, is that the Mayor of London has not visited a single crime scene or spoken to a single bereaved family. I find that absolutely, truly and totally extraordinary. I've no idea whether treating knife crime as a public health issue works, but the argument goes the numbers have halved in Glasgow. So, hey, try anything to make the situation better. Back to the Prime Minister, back to maintaining the integrity of the United Kingdom, but also back to the backstop, which he agreed to last December. Does she need a different tack with those leaders tonight? I certainly think she does. Let's go to Dartford and speak to Steve, a new caller to this show. Welcome, Steve.
Hi, Nigel. Yes, you wanted a different opinion as to whether Northern Ireland should remain part of the UK. As a sort of an ardent Englishman, then I don't. It doesn't really concern me. There are only 2 million people living in Northern Ireland. Northern Ireland could have the same status as the Isle of Man or the Channel Islands, so they could be slightly different. I mean, I'm all for having a federal UK with England having its own parliament. So I'm not really bothered about that, and I think possibly for the island to have critical mass, then the 2 million people in Northern Ireland, the 3 million people in Southern Ireland would possibly be a good idea, and then it'd be comparable to Scotland.
Well, yeah, but they have to agree, Steve. You can't just force it upon them. And, we have to remember, I don't know how old you are, Steve. When were you born?
64.
64, same as me. But, so, you can remember from when we were very little, right the way through most of our adult lives, those troubles raged. Something like 3,500 people killed, 5,000 people seriously maimed and wounded. I mean, some pretty shocking things happened over there. And the Good Friday Agreement, and Steve, I had reservations about it, but the Good Friday Agreement has brought relative peace. It has brought prosperity back to large parts of Northern Ireland. And it's explicit when it says that only the people of Northern Ireland can decide their own future. We as the English, Steve, can't say cheerio.
That's true, but we didn't actually have a vote on that Northern Ireland agreement, it was historically due to the fact that the island of Ireland did actually democratically want to have its own devolved parliament, and the British Parliament continued to block it for many, many years. That resulted in the troubles in the first place.
Steve, if we go back to old man Gladstone in the late 19th century and had some formula for home rule, that could have given the Protestants protection, we'd never have suffered any of this, and I agree with that. But Steve, your point is a clear one. I asked for that point of view. You've given it to me. Brexit matters more than Northern Ireland, yeah?
Thanks, then. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much indeed. Now, and Steve, by the way, not alone, because when LBC conducted this poll, nearly a third of people said, actually, leaving the European Union to them mattered more than what happened to Northern Ireland. And you probably would get the same answer if you asked the question about Scotland too. So the point of view that Steve gave you there, an entirely legitimate one. Nigel, you asked, what score would Mrs May get? Minus 1,000%. Wouldn't trust her with anything. She loves the EU so much, she'd pack their bags and clear off and live in their beloved place. Jennifer, come on, she's not that bad, is she? Gosh, here's me defending the Prime Minister. That's not good, is it? Well, at least the Prime Minister says she will carry out the will of the people. The one thing I do want to hear, Jennifer, please, one day, just one day, can the Prime Minister tell us that she believes in leaving the European Union? I'd love that. I'd cheer. Aaron says on Facebook, when Theresa May speaks to the leaders of the EU27, she needs to shout, no deal, drop the mic and walk out. Well, that would be an approach. I don't see it being entirely in keeping with her personality. Christine says Barnier has made a problem where there isn't one. Couldn't agree more. All with the aim of trying to wreck Brexit. Christine, you're on the money. They raised this issue. They terrified the British Prime Minister, who then played herself into checkmate. Let's go to Brechin and speak to John. John, hi.
Hi there, Nigel.
Now, presumably, if Northern Ireland was treated any differently to the rest of the United Kingdom, we'd get the SNP asking for Scotland to have different treatment too, wouldn't we?
Well, absolutely. You're 100% correct there. Of course, the SNP will be looking for any reason to throw a wrench in the works there. But the UK needs to be treated as one until whichever they decide. You know, if Northern Ireland wants to be treated differently, that's for them to decide, just as it is Scotland. However, until that point, we've all voted to remain together as the United Kingdom. And it's
Absolutely.
the United Kingdom that needs to go forward in these Brexit negotiations, not the individual nations that make up the United Kingdom.
Yeah, it's a funny one, actually, isn't it, with the SNP leader, because she rejects the result of the Scottish referendum and she rejects the result of the EU referendum. But she can't have it her own way all the time. John, so you think the Prime Minister is right to stick to this position?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I've not been overly impressed with her up until this point. This is the first time I can remember in a while now that I've actually had something positive to say about her. It does present her in a stronger light now, and I hope it's something we're going to see pushing forward.
Wow.
Whether or not that happens, I don't know. She's known to backtrack now and then. At the moment, I'm pretty positive about it.
The trouble is, John, it was having this firm position that made her give in to the backstop, and then the backstop being unacceptable to give in to Chequers, which effectively would keep the whole of the UK in regulatory alignment with the rest of the EU. Like you, John, I want her to do well. I want her to succeed. I wanted her, when I heard her at Lancaster House, to mean what she said, but it's difficult. John, I thank you for your call. I'm going to Tunbridge Wells to speak to a new caller, Richard. Good evening, Richard.
Good evening, Nigel.
How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Good. I was in Tunbridge Wells yesterday. Do you have the worst traffic of any town in southern England?
Yes, we do.
Yes, it was murder getting in there.
Absolutely awful.
Delightful place once I did.
I'm happily in a position where I can't drive because I'm blind, so I don't have to worry about it.
Okay. Well, Richard, you may be blind, but you clearly care a lot about this issue. You've got your finger on the pulse. What is Theresa May doing?
That, we should simply drop Northern Ireland down the pan.
Should we?
Yes.
Just ditch them?
Yes.
What?
I don't see
Richard, hang on. There are nearly 2 million people living there. You can't just ditch them.
Yes, I know, but if we go along this route, I guarantee that in 10 years, Northern Ireland will actually decide that it doesn't want to be part of the UK anyway. It will have a border poll, and it will do it, and there will be a border poll, and there will be no border, and then it will be... But they voted to remain. They can stay in the EU if they want. That's fine. But they just don't have to stay in the UK.
It's an odd one, Richard, because if you'd asked me 10 years ago, if we had a UK referendum, which part of the UK would have been the most Eurosceptic? I would have said Northern Ireland. But the odd thing that happened was that the SNP, having been... Sorry, I apologise. Sinn Féin, having been fierce opponents of the European project, suddenly decided they loved it. And that, I think, is why we got the result that we did. I don't know what a future border poll in Northern Ireland would suggest, but I would say this to you, Richard, that if they had a referendum in a few years' time, that meant not just joining up with the Republic, but joining the European Union too, and having to take the euro as the currency, I'm not sure they'd go for that.
I think they would.
Do you? Okay,
yes.
So what you're saying is actually this is going to happen inevitably, so they don't matter. But what would you?
Right.
But what would you say to them? So what would you do, Richard? You would sign up. You know, they can stay part of the customs union. The new border is in the middle of the Irish Sea. And
I wouldn't. I'd say, sorry, we don't really care about this. You can have Northern Ireland.
Hang on, we can't cede territory to a foreign power, Richard. Come on, we can't do that.
The Irish. Oh, sorry, they're only Irish.
All right, OK, Richard, thank you. Well, that was a very strong opinion we got there from Disgusted of Tunbridge Wells. Wow. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show here on LBC. It's 6:45 and time for the news headlines with Lisa Aziz. By text, Mark makes the key political point. I don't think Theresa May will drop the ball as she has the DUP propping up her government, and the DUP would not stand for it. Mark, without those 10 DUP votes, she would not have a majority in the House of Commons. Any proposal that sees Northern Ireland being treated constitutionally different to the rest of the UK would be seen as an act of treachery. That's the word they'd use. And, all support for her government would go. So she will stick to this Northern Ireland thing. Incidentally, I believe it's the right thing for her to do. It's right to maintain the integrity of the UK. We voted as one, and it's there in the Good Friday Agreement. But the trouble is, the price she's paid for this is to agree to the backstop and to agree to checkers, which leaves her now in a very weak place, going into a negotiation where she could actually potentially be in a strong place, because the others are beginning to want to have a sensible deal. Christopher on Facebook says, I live in Northern Ireland. The suggestion that my country will be forced to leave, and if this happens, then it would violate the Good Friday Agreement. We didn't suffer 35 years to lose our home to the EU and to IRA violence. Christopher, I suspect there are very many people in Northern Ireland who would express that view, and anybody out there living in Northern Ireland wants to ring me 03456060973. We're going to Nottingham to speak to Carter, a new caller to this show. Good evening.
Good evening, Nigel. Very nice to talk to you for the first time.
Well, welcome to the show, Carter. So, should the UK stay together? Is she right about that?
Absolutely. I believe in the union, and the union is something that we should defend. Sadly, we've got a Prime Minister who's two-faced. She knows when to promise, and she knows when to keep her promises.
She's very good at promising, Carter. She was very good very good as Home Secretary. She stands up and makes the big speech, and I will give you back, control of your borders and your laws and your money, and you get the impression maybe she's been wound up at the back in the morning. Very good at making promises, not so good at delivery.
And if I was living in Northern Ireland, I'd be extremely worried, because you can't trust a word that comes out of her mouth.
Carter, can I ask you something? Have you felt this cynical about previous Prime Ministers?
Only Tony Blair.
Only Tony Blair. Okay, right. Okay. So what do you think she's going to do then, Carter?
She's in it for herself. It's as simple as that. And she's there to make a name for herself. She's not thought of anyone in the agreement that she's drawn up. She's only thought of herself and her position, and she somehow drummed up this crazy idea in Chequers that, and I'd like to know who actually helped her design it.
No. The answer to that's very clear. David Davis was the Brexit secretary. He produced a draft, to which he said, well, that's jolly good work, David. Well done, you. Patted him on the head and then took a brief from the civil service.
Exactly. This is what annoys the hell out of me. And, if she wanted to, and if it suited her, Northern Ireland, she'd sign it away tomorrow. No problem.
But she can't do that with 10 DUP MPs, can she?
Well, she's done a lot. Let me put it. I voted for her in the election. Since the Maastricht Treaty, I refused to vote.
Really?
The Maastricht Treaty was an act of treason.
And yet, having had that view for nearly a quarter of a century, you voted for Theresa May.
Yeah, because I believed her promises, and I'm so disappointed in her. And I tell you what, she knows exactly what she's doing. And if it suits her tonight that Northern Ireland is nothing, as opposed to a greater picture or a greater vision that she believes in.
Wow.
I'm telling you, she will sell them down the road. I promise you.
So you feel so Carter, you feel pretty done, don't you?
I voted after 25 years for a Prime Minister who's completely done a U-turn.
Dear. Carter, thank you for that interesting story. Going to another new caller in Swansea, Jem. Hello there.
Oh, hi there, Nigel. Nice to speak to you.
Good to speak to you. So what do you... I mean, is she right to try and maintain the integrity of the UK?
My central point is that she's not right, you're right. Okay. We should have a free trade agreement with Europe. The EU could easily do that. They could easily sort it out with Northern Ireland. They're deliberately not doing it because they want to use it as a bargaining chip against the UK in Brexit negotiations. They're basically trying to blackmail us. And I know people who voted Remain and didn't vote in the referendum who would now vote Leave because they're disgusted at the behaviour of the EU trying to punish us for daring to have democracy and vote to leave them.
Yeah.
They should be behaving like a mature democracy, the EU.
Well, they're not.
Behaving like an immature empire, harking back to Napoleonic expansionism. And they've got complete and utter contempt for the wishes of ordinary people. And you do that in Northern Ireland, you're playing with fire.
Yeah,
no,
well,
I'm no
quite.
expert,
well, quite.
but,
It's almost as if, I mean, I felt, Jem, and I've said this before, it's almost as if Monsieur Barnier is quite happy to stoke up some of those arguments again after 20 years of it being pretty settled.
All these problems, they could be solved if there's the will. But they have, from the start, from the moment this country voted to leave, they've been trying to punish us. And my mum, who would have been 93 today, she died in December, she was a staunch Remainer, okay? She was a member of the Britain in Europe group in the 90s, but she accepted the vote.
Yeah.
Because she believed in democracy.
Yeah.
She wasn't one of these people who wanted a so-called people's vote to have a vote again and again. I mean, I live in Wales with a Welsh heritage. In 1999, I didn't live here. They had a vote here. Do you want a Welsh Assembly? The majority was 2,000.
It was tiddly, wasn't it?
The percentage was 50.1% for,
I remember.
49.9% against. And if they had it now, because we're fourth of four in education and healthcare in Wales, run by the Welsh Assembly, which is basically a one-party Labour state. We once had a Labour Plaid Cymru coalition, yippee-doo. But, probably it'd be 60% against.
It may well be. No, you're right. Jem, thank you for your call. And also the fact that it would have been your mother's birthday. It is my mother's birthday. I haven't yet rung her. Thank you for reminding me. I will do that at 7 o'clock. Well, maybe 8 o'clock after I've listened to the interview with Dominic Raab. I've got time for one last caller on this subject tonight. I'm going to go to Stanley in Lanark in Scotland. Good evening, Stanley.
Good evening, Nigel. Yes, what Northern Ireland issue should be resolved between Westminster, Stormont and the Dial.
Mm-hmm.
But I would go on to say, actually, I was incensed today when I bought a Daily Express and on the front page, picture of Theresa May with Brexit plan delivers freedoms people voted for. That's not what I voted for. Me and the majority of the country voted to exit the EU unconditionally.
No, but this is the spin, Stanley, isn't it? They keep putting on it. I mean, she keeps pretending she's delivering the Brexit people voted for when you and I know that she's not. But she is right, surely, Stanley, at least in one thing, and in saying she wants to maintain the integrity of the United Kingdom.
Right, but also she's basically repeating what David Cameron said in 2016, prior to the referendum. He went round the country and he said, look, Britons are free to do, but there are certain things where we're only allowed to do. And freedom, that's what...
Well, he also told us, Stanley, we will abide by your vote. And hey, here they are trying not to. Thank you. I'm with Richard. Ditch Northern Ireland, says Johnny in Norfolk. Some of you want to ditch Northern Ireland, very